I'm Jessica Barnes, 34, and I never thought I'd see the day when my own sister would pour ice water over my head during a family dinner and tell me I had 10 minutes to leave her house. What she didn't know was that I had evidence that would not only shatter her perfect image, but expose a betrayal that had been festering for years. A betrayal that would ultimately tear our family apart and force everyone to choose sides. Hey everyone! Before I dive into what might be the most dramatic family showdown of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this family revenge drama already has you hooked, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories that'll make your family drama seem tame in comparison. Trust me, what happens after those 10 minutes will leave you speechless, so stick around to see how karma finally caught up to my sister. Now let's rewind to how it all began. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, there was never any question about who was the favorite child in the Barnes family. My sister Victoria, 3 years older than me, had always been the golden child. She was the one with straight A's, the perfect attendance record, the cheerleading captain, and later the successful corporate lawyer with the picture-perfect family. Our parents, Richard and Eleanor Barnes, never tried to hide their preference, constantly showcasing Victoria's accomplishments, while mine were treated as afterthoughts. Jessica, why can't you be more like your sister, became the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that I would always be second best in my parents' eyes. While Victoria collected trophies and accolades, I found solace in photography and writing, creative pursuits that my practically minded parents considered hobbies rather than real career paths. Despite this imbalance, Victoria and I maintained what I thought was a decent relationship. We weren't best friends, but we weren't enemies either. At least that's what I believed. There were moments of genuine sisterly affection between us: shopping trips, late-night talks, supporting each other through breakups. I cherished these moments, clinging to the hope that blood would always be thicker than water. After college, I pursued my passion and became a freelance photographer specializing in nature and wildlife photography. My work took me around the world, from the rainforests of Brazil to the savannas of Africa. While I wasn't making lawyer money like Victoria, I was building a respectable portfolio and beginning to make a name for myself in photography circles. My parents, however, still viewed my career choice as a phase I would eventually outgrow. Victoria, meanwhile, climbed the corporate ladder at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. She married her college sweetheart Michael, a successful investment banker, and they built a sprawling 5-bedroom colonial in Wellesley, complete with a perfectly manicured lawn and a swimming pool. They had 2 children, Emma and Ethan, who quickly became the center of attention at all family gatherings. When I returned from assignments, I would stay with Victoria and her family, partly because my nomadic lifestyle didn't warrant a permanent residence, and partly because it gave me the opportunity to bond with my niece and nephew. Emma and Ethan adored their Aunt Jess, the cool aunt who showed them photos of exotic animals and far-off places. I loved being that person for them, the window to a world beyond their privileged suburban existence. What I didn't realize was that beneath Victoria's seemingly perfect exterior, resentment was brewing. Despite having everything: the successful career, the perfect husband, the beautiful children, our parents' unwavering approval, Victoria harbored a deep-seated jealousy of my freedom, my unconventional life, and most importantly, the special bond I shared with her children. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed: the subtle digs about my unstable lifestyle, the backhanded compliments about my work, the way she would interrupt when I was telling the kids stories about my travels. But I chalked it up to typical sibling rivalry, never suspecting the depths of her animosity or the lengths to which she would go to undermine me. The catalyst for our eventual confrontation was a seemingly innocent discovery I made while staying at Victoria's house 3 months ago. I had just returned from a 6-month assignment documenting endangered species in Southeast Asia. Victoria had invited me to stay until I sorted out my next project, an offer I gratefully accepted as it would give me time to catch up with Emma and Ethan, now 10 and 8 years old. One afternoon, while Victoria and Michael were at work and the kids at school, I was organizing my equipment in the guest room when I noticed a folder on the desk, a folder with my name on it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it unprepared for what I would find inside: printed copies of emails between Victoria and various potential clients of mine. Emails in which she had systematically sabotaged job opportunities that would have taken my career to the next level. The folder contained dozens of emails spanning over 5 years. Victoria, using her professional email signature as a corporate lawyer, had contacted magazines, publishing houses, and wildlife conservation organizations that had expressed interest in my work. In these communications, she portrayed herself as my business manager and cited scheduling conflicts or contractual issues as reasons why I couldn't accept their offers. Some emails even suggested alternative photographers, my direct competitors for the jobs. My hands trembled as I read email after email. One particularly devastating correspondence was with National Geographic, which had been interested in featuring my Southeast Asian endangered species project. Victoria had declined the opportunity on my behalf, claiming I was dealing with health issues and would be taking a break from photography for the foreseeable future. That explained why they hadn't responded to my follow-up pitch when I returned. The betrayal cut deep. While I had been struggling to establish myself in a competitive field-flying economy to remote locations and sleeping in tents or cheap hostels to stretch my budget, my own sister had been actively working against me. She had sabotaged opportunities that could have provided financial stability and professional recognition, all while offering her guest room as though she were doing me a favor. I sat on the edge of the bed, the evidence spread around me, trying to make sense of it all. Why would Victoria, who had everything, try to sabotage my career? What did she gain from keeping me struggling? The only explanation I could come up with was that Victoria needed me to fail to validate her own choices. My freedom and unconventional lifestyle threatened the narrative she had built that her path, the stable job, the marriage, the house in the suburbs, was the only path to happiness and success. In a state of shock, I carefully photographed each document with my phone, creating a digital record of Victoria's betrayal. Then I replaced the folder exactly where I had found it and left the house, walking aimlessly around Victoria's neighborhood for hours, trying to process what I had discovered. When I returned, I maintained a facade of normalcy, though each interaction with Victoria now felt tainted. Every smile, every casual question about my plans, every seemingly supportive comment about my career now had a sinister undertone. I was living with someone who had deliberately sabotaged my dreams while pretending to support me. That evening, Victoria invited me to join a dinner party she was hosting for some colleagues from her law firm. I agreed, partly because I needed time to figure out my next move and partly because I didn't want to arouse suspicion. Throughout the dinner, I watched Victoria in a new light: the practiced charm, the effortless way she commanded the room, the subtle competitiveness that simmered beneath her gracious hostess persona. I wondered how many other people in her life she had manipulated or undermined to maintain her position at the top. Over the following weeks, I continued my investigation. Using Victoria's passwords, her children's birthdays combined, not very secure for a corporate lawyer, I accessed her email account when she was away and found even more evidence of her sabotage. She hadn't just interfered with potential jobs. She had also badmouthed me to mutual friends in the industry, painting me as unreliable and difficult to work with. No wonder some photographers had been reluctant to collaborate with me on projects. The most crushing discovery came when I found emails between Victoria and our parents. She had been feeding them misinformation about my career, telling them that I was exaggerating my successes and that my financial struggles were due to poor decisions rather than the inherently unstable nature of freelance work. This explained why my parents had been increasingly critical of my career choices in recent years, urging me to get a real job and settle down like Victoria. Armed with this knowledge, I faced a difficult decision. Confronting Victoria meant potentially destroying our relationship and dividing the family. But saying nothing meant allowing her to continue sabotaging my career and poisoning my relationship with our parents and others in the industry. The decision was made for me when I received an email from a wildlife conservation organization in Africa. They were surprised to hear from me directly, as they had been told by my representative that I was taking a year-long sabbatical. This was an opportunity I had been dreaming of, a chance to document the work of anti-poaching units protecting endangered rhinos. The project came with a substantial grant and publication opportunities that could elevate my career to new heights. This was the final straw. Victoria hadn't just interfered with my past, she was actively sabotaging my future. The time for silence was over. I decided to confront her at the upcoming family dinner where everyone, Victoria, Michael, the kids, and our parents would be present. It was time for the truth to come out regardless of the consequences. Victoria's dinner parties were always meticulously planned affairs. This particular Sunday dinner was no exception, with the dining table set with her finest china crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier, and the aroma of her signature roast filling the air. It was the perfect setting for the implosion of our family's carefully constructed facade. Our parents arrived first, my father bringing an expensive bottle of wine, as usual, my mother immediately complimenting Victoria on the table setting. They barely acknowledged my presence with a cursory hello before diving into conversation with their favorite daughter about her latest courtroom victory. I observed this familiar dynamic with new eyes, seeing clearly how Victoria basked in their approval while subtly directing the conversation to highlight her accomplishments. Michael, ever the dutiful husband, played his part perfectly, pouring wine and laughing at all the right moments. Emma and Ethan, dressed in coordinating outfits that Victoria had selected, were allowed to join the adults at the table for the first time, a special occasion that Victoria had orchestrated knowing I would be unlikely to make a scene with the children present. It was a calculated move, one of many I now recognized as part of Victoria's manipulative playbook. Throughout the appetizer course, I remained uncharacteristically quiet, gathering my courage while the conversation flowed around me. Victoria occasionally threw concerned glances my way, probably wondering if I was feeling unwell. Little did she know that I was preparing to detonate a bomb that would shatter her perfect image. "Jessica, you're awfully quiet tonight," my mother finally noticed halfway through the main course. "Are you not feeling well?" Victoria immediately jumped in. "She's probably jet-lagged from all that economy travel. I keep telling her she should save up for business class, especially for those long flights." There it was, the subtle dig disguised as concern, the implication that my financial situation was due to poor planning rather than her active sabotage of my career opportunities. "Actually," I said, placing my fork down carefully, "I've been thinking about some interesting emails I came across recently." Victoria's fork paused midway to her mouth, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she resumed her practiced smile. "Oh, work-related, I hope." "Any exciting new projects?" "Very exciting," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "In fact, I was just contacted by the Rhino Conservation Trust in South Africa. They were surprised to hear from me directly since my representative told them I was taking a sabbatical." The color drained from Victoria's face, but she quickly recovered. "How strange. Must be some kind of miscommunication." That's what I thought at first. I continued taking a sip of water to steady myself until I found a folder in your home office with my name on it. A folder containing dozens of emails to my potential clients over the past 5 years. The dining room fell silent. Michael looked confused. My parents exchanged glances, and Victoria's knuckles turned white as she gripped her knife and fork. "Jessica, I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled panic. And this isn't the time or place for whatever grievance you've invented. Invented, I pulled out my phone and brought up the photos I had taken of the emails. Like you invented being my business manager, or invented health issues to explain why I couldn't accept a National Geographic assignment. I handed my phone to Michael, who scrolled through the images with increasing disbelief. Victoria, what is this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It's nothing, Victoria snapped, attempting to grab the phone from him. Jessica's misinterpreting things as usual. Am I misinterpreting the email where you told the Wildlife Photography Association that I was unreliable and difficult to work with? I challenged, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. Or the ones where you told Mom and Dad that I was exaggerating my successes? My parents, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, turned to Victoria. You did what my father demanded. Victoria's composed facade finally cracked. You don't understand, she hissed, directing her fury at me. You waltz in here with your stories about exotic places and dangerous adventures, and everyone falls at your feet. Poor Jessica, the struggling artist, so brave, so free, while I'm stuck in the suburbs with a mortgage and responsibilities. Stuck? Michael echoed, clearly stung. Is that how you feel about our life? Victoria ignored him, her attention focused entirely on me. You think you're so special with your photographs and your travel stories. The kids worship you after your brief visits, while I'm the one getting them through homework and driving them to soccer practice. You have no idea what real life is like. So you sabotaged my career because you're jealous of my freedom? I asked incredulously. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked, how many opportunities I've lost because of you? You should be thanking me. Victoria shouted, standing up so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. I gave you a place to stay. I let you be part of this family, despite your selfish choices. Selfish? I stood to face her. Was it selfish when I stayed with Emma for 3 nights in the hospital when she had pneumonia, because you and Michael were at that partner's retreat? Or when I helped Ethan with his photography project that won first prize, the one you? I took credit for supporting in that PTA newsletter. Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. You think you can come into my house and turn my family against me with your lies? They're not lies, Victoria. They're your emails, your words, your actions, I said, forcing myself to remain steady. For years, I wondered why my career wasn't progressing despite positive feedback. Now I know it's because my own sister was actively sabotaging me while pretending to support me. What happened next occurred so quickly that I barely had time to react. Victoria grabbed her glass of water and threw it directly in my face, the ice cubes stinging as they hit my skin. You have exactly 10 minutes to pack your things and get out of my house, she snarled, her voice low and venomous. After that, I'm throwing whatever's left of your stuff into the street. Water dripped from my hair onto Victoria's immaculate dining room floor as a stunned silence enveloped the room. Emma and Ethan sat frozen in their chairs, eyes wide with shock and confusion. Michael stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time, while our parents' expressions wavered between disbelief and growing anger. Victoria Ann Barnes, my mother's voice cut through the tension. In all my 34 years, I had never heard her use that tone with Victoria. How dare you behave this way at your own dinner table, in front of your children? Victoria turned to our mother, clearly expecting support. Mom, you don't understand. Jessica is trying to. No, Victoria, my father interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically firm. We saw the emails. Those weren't Jessica's interpretations. Those were your words. Victoria's face contorted with rage and betrayal as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being automatically believed or defended by our parents. So you're taking her side. After everything I've accomplished, everything I've done to make you proud, you're choosing her. This isn't about sides, my father said, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose, a gesture I recognize from childhood disagreements. This is about the truth. And the truth is, you deliberately sabotaged your sister's career. Michael stood up, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Kids, go to your rooms, please. When Victoria began to protest, he silenced her with a look I had never seen him direct at her before. Not now, Victoria. They've seen and heard enough. As Emma and Ethan reluctantly left the dining room, casting worried glances back at us, I used a napkin to dry my face, still trying to process what had just happened. The ice water had been shocking, but even more shocking was seeing my perfect sister completely lose control, and seeing my parents for once not rushing to her defense. I think we all need to calm down, Michael suggested, always the mediator. Jessica, you don't need to leave. This is as much your family as it is Victoria's. Victoria let out a harsh laugh. Oh, that's rich, Michael. Taking her side too. Should I book you a ticket to Africa so you can follow her around, taking pictures of elephants and escaping your responsibilities too? That's enough, Michael said firmly. This isn't the woman I married, Victoria. The woman I married wouldn't sabotage her own sister out of jealousy. Victoria's face crumpled for a moment before hardening again. Fine. If that's how everyone feels, then you can all leave with her. I'm going upstairs to check on my children, the children I've raised while Jessica was off finding herself around the world. With that, Victoria stormed out of the dining room, leaving the four of us in uncomfortable silence. After a moment, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. Jessica, I'm so sorry. We had no idea Victoria was doing this to you. Would it have mattered if you did? I asked softly, years of hurt bubbling to the surface. You've always taken her side, always thought her path was the right one. My father looked down at his plate. You're right, we haven't been fair to you. We didn't understand your choices because they were so different from what we had envisioned for you. But that doesn't mean they weren't valid choices. It was the closest my father had ever come to an apology, and despite everything, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. Michael, meanwhile, was scrolling through the emails on my phone again, his expression growing more troubled with each swipe. Some of these are sent from our home computer, he said finally. On nights when I was working late or traveling for business. She's been doing this for years, systematically. He trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. What are you going to do now? My mother asked me. Before I could answer, we heard a loud crash from upstairs, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Michael raced up the stairs with my father close behind, while my mother and I exchanged worried glances. She wouldn't hurt the children, would she? My mother whispered. No, I assured her, though a flicker of uncertainty passed through me. I had never seen Victoria this unhinged before. She loves Emma and Ethan more than anything. We followed the men upstairs to find Victoria in my guest room, throwing my camera equipment against the wall. My expensive telephoto lens lay shattered on the floor, along with frames containing some of my favorite photographs. Victoria, stop! Michael grabbed her arms as she reached for my laptop. This is madness. Get off me, Victoria struggled against his grip. She deserves this. She comes into my house, turns my family against me, and expects no consequences. I stood in the doorway, surveying the damage with a strange sense of detachment. The destroyed equipment represented thousands of dollars and countless hours of work, yet all I felt was pity for my sister, a woman who seemingly had everything but was so consumed by jealousy that she would destroy what mattered most to me. Hey everyone, I know we're at a really intense moment in the story, and I can see you're all wondering what happens next. Will Victoria regain her composure? Will my relationship with my parents improve after this revelation? And most importantly, what about those emails that could affect my career? Before I continue with how this family showdown develops, I want to thank you all for staying with me through this emotional journey. If you're feeling as shocked as I was in that moment, hit that like button to let me know. I'm not alone. I'm about to reveal what happened when Victoria's perfect facade completely shattered, so make sure you stay subscribed so you don't miss how this family drama unfolds. Now let's get back to that devastating moment in the guest room. As Michael struggled to restrain Victoria, Emma appeared in the doorway, her small face streaked with tears. "Mom, why are you breaking Aunt Jess's things? Why did you lie about her work?" Victoria froze suddenly, aware of her daughter's presence. The rage drained from her face, replaced by something closer to shame. "Emma, go back to your room. This doesn't concern you." "But it does," Emma insisted with the directness only children can manage. "You always tell us that lying is wrong. But you lied about Aunt Jess. You lied to everyone." Victoria's shoulders slumped as she looked from her daughter to the destruction she had caused. The fight seemed to leave her all at once, and Michael cautiously released his grip on her arms. "I think my father said carefully that Victoria and Michael need some time alone to talk. Jessica, why don't you come stay with your mother and me tonight?" Victoria didn't protest, which was perhaps the most telling sign of how much the situation had shifted. The sister who had always fought to maintain control, who had never admitted defeat, simply sat on the edge of the bed amidst the wreckage of my belongings and stared at the floor. My mother helped me salvage what I could of my equipment and pack a bag. As we prepared to leave, Emma and Ethan insisted on hugging me goodbye, making me promise that I would come back to see them soon. "Of course I will," I assured them, though I honestly wasn't sure if that would be possible given what had transpired. "I'll always be your Aunt Jess, no matter what." As we drove to my parents' house, a heavy silence filled the car. My father occasionally shook his head in disbelief, while my mother kept reaching back to pat my knee reassuringly. It was strange being treated with such concern by parents who had always reserved their worry and attention for Victoria. "We failed you," my mother said finally as we pulled into their driveway. "We should have seen what Victoria was doing. We should have supported your choices more." "It's not entirely your fault," I conceded, though part of me wanted to hold on to the resentment I had carried for years. "Victoria has always been good at controlling the narrative." That night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of a past I had long since outgrown, I faced the reality that my relationship with my sister might never recover. The betrayal went too deep, the damage too extensive. Yet, despite everything, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth was finally out, and with it came the possibility of building more honest relationships with the rest of my family. The week following the disastrous family dinner was a blur of damage control and uncomfortable conversations. My parents, to their credit, were determined to make amends for their years of favoritism. My father, a man of action rather than words, helped me file an insurance claim for my damaged equipment and even dipped into his retirement fund to replace my most expensive camera lens immediately. "You need this for your work," he said simply, when I protested the expense. "Your work matters, Jessica." Those 4 words, "your work matters," were more healing than I could have anticipated. After years of having my career dismissed as a hobby or a phase, hearing my father acknowledge the value of my photography felt like a validation I hadn't known I needed. My mother, meanwhile, took a different approach to reconciliation. She spent hours going through my portfolio, asking questions about each photograph, trying to understand the skill and patience required to capture those moments. She even created a dedicated Jessica Barnes photography album on her social media accounts, sharing my work with her extensive network of friends and acquaintances. "I should have done this years ago," she admitted one evening as we sat looking through prints of my Southeast Asian wildlife series. "I was so busy bragging about Victoria's law career that I never gave your accomplishments the recognition they deserved." While my relationship with my parents was healing, Victoria remained a volatile variable in the equation. Michael called me 3 days after the confrontation, his voice tired and strained. Victoria's struggling, he said. She's agreed to start seeing a therapist to work through her issues. She knows she was wrong, but she's not ready to face you yet. And you? I asked cautiously. Where do you stand in all this? Michael sighed heavily. I love my wife, Jessica, but what she did to you was inexcusable. I honestly don't know if I can look at her the same way again. The person who wrote those emails, who deliberately sabotaged your career, that's not the woman I thought I married. People are complicated. I offered, surprised to find myself defending the sister who had betrayed me. Victoria's always felt the pressure to be perfect. Maybe living up to that image became too much. That's generous of you, Michael said with a hint of surprise. More generous than I'm feeling right now, to be honest. The children, Emma and Ethan, were another concern. Victoria had initially prohibited them from contacting me, but Michael overruled her and allowed them to call me several times a week. Their innocent questions about when I was coming back and whether Mommy and I had made up yet broke my heart. How do you explain adult betrayal and complex family dynamics to children who simply miss their aunt? As for my career, the revelation of Victoria's sabotage actually opened doors that had previously been closed to me. I reached out to the contacts she had misled, explaining the situation without going into the humiliating details. Most were understanding, and several even extended new offers for collaboration. The Wildlife Conservation Project in Africa in particular was still available, and they were eager to have me on board. The timing couldn't have been better or worse depending on how you looked at it. Taking the assignment meant leaving just as my family was in crisis, but staying meant potentially missing a career-defining opportunity. After much deliberation, I decided to accept the project but delay my departure by 2 weeks to help navigate the immediate family fallout. During those 2 weeks, I received an unexpected ally in my quest to repair what Victoria had broken. My cousin Rachel, who had always been closer to Victoria due to their similar age, reached out to me after hearing about the confrontation from my mother. I always wondered why you never responded to my recommendation for that travel magazine gig 3 years ago, she said when we met for coffee. Victoria told me you weren't interested because the pay was too low, but that didn't sound like you. It wasn't me, I confirmed. I never even knew about the offer. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. I can't believe she would do that to you. Victoria always seemed so put together, so perfect. That was the problem, I said, stirring my coffee thoughtfully. The pressure to maintain that perfect image was crushing her. In her mind, my freedom threatened that image, made her question her own choices. Rachel gave me a searching look. You sound like you're trying to forgive her. Trying is the operative word, I admitted. I understand why she did it, but understanding and forgiveness aren't the same thing. 10 days after the confrontation, Victoria finally reached out, not with a call or a visit, but with an email. The irony wasn't lost on me that she chose the very medium she had used to betray me as her vehicle for attempted reconciliation. The email was clinical, detached, more like a legal statement than a personal apology. She acknowledged her inappropriate actions and expressed regret for any negative impact they may have had on my career. She claimed that therapy was helping her recognize her competitive tendencies and promised to make amends in a manner deemed appropriate by all parties involved. What struck me most wasn't what the email said, but what it didn't say. There was no acknowledgement of the pain she had caused, no recognition of the trust she had violated. No genuine remorse for years of deliberate sabotage. It was an apology crafted to protect herself rather than heal our relationship. I forwarded the email to my parents, who were as disappointed by its tone as I was. Give her time, my mother advised, though I could tell she was troubled by Victoria's approach. This is the first step. It's hard for her to admit she was wrong. 2 days before my scheduled departure for Africa, Michael called to invite me to dinner at their house, just me, no parents or children present. Victoria wants to talk face to face, he explained. I think it would be good for both of you to clear the air before you leave. I agreed with trepidation. The prospect of returning to the house where Victoria had thrown water in my face and destroyed my equipment was daunting but necessary if there was any hope of salvaging our relationship. When I arrived, Michael greeted me at the door with an apologetic smile. "She's nervous," he whispered as he took my coat. "We both are. Thank you for coming." Victoria was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa as if ready to flee at any moment. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual perfect makeup and carefully styled hair. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Jessica," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, acutely aware of Michael hovering anxiously in the doorway. "You wanted to talk," I prompted when Victoria remained silent. She nodded, then glanced at Michael. "Could you give us a few minutes alone?" Michael hesitated, looking between us uncertainly. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "It's okay," I assured him. "We're both adults. We can have a civilized conversation." After Michael reluctantly left the room, Victoria and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several moments. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies," she said, staring at her hands. "She says I've built my identity around being the best, the most successful, the perfect daughter and mother and wife. And when you started getting recognition for your photography, when the kids started admiring your adventures and freedom, I felt threatened." It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say. "That doesn't excuse what you did, Victoria." "No," she agreed, finally meeting my eyes. "It doesn't. Nothing excuses it. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I've been lying to myself about it for years, justifying it as protecting you or the family or some other nonsense. The truth is, I was jealous and insecure, and I lashed out in the most destructive way I could find." The rawness of her admission took me by surprise. This wasn't the polished, detached apology from her email. This was Victoria, stripped of her defenses, finally confronting the ugliness of what she had done. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued when I remained silent. "I wouldn't in your position. But I need you to know that I'm truly sorry, not just for getting caught, but for every email, every lie, every opportunity I took from you. You deserved better from your sister." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found only exhaustion and regret. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully. "It's a start." Victoria nodded, accepting the limited olive branch I was offering. "Michael told me about the Africa project. It sounds amazing." "When do you leave?" "Day after tomorrow," I replied, still wary of her interest in my plans given our history. "I won't interfere," she promised, reading my concern. "In fact, I've already contacted the conservation organization to clarify that I am not and never was your representative. I've also reached out to some of the other contacts I misled to correct the record." "Thank you," I said, genuinely surprised by this proactive approach. "That helps." We talked for another hour, not solving everything, but at least beginning to clear away the debris of years of deception. Victoria explained that her therapist had diagnosed her with a need for control that stemmed from childhood insecurities that had been inadvertently reinforced by our parents' constant praise and high expectations. Being the favorite came with its own burden, she admitted. I was terrified of disappointing them, of losing their approval. So I built this perfect life, this perfect image, and defended it at all costs, even if it meant hurting you. Before I left, Victoria handed me an envelope. "This isn't a bribe or a quick fix," she said, as I opened it to find a check for a substantial amount. "It's compensation for the equipment I destroyed and the opportunities I stole. It can't make up for everything, but it's a practical step toward making amends." I accepted the check, recognizing it as the tangible gesture of remorse that Victoria was capable of offering right now. Emotional healing would take much longer if it happened at all. 2 days later, I boarded a plane to Johannesburg with mixed emotions. The Africa Project represented a professional breakthrough, a chance to document the critical work of anti-poaching units and bring awareness to rhino conservation efforts. Yet leaving in the midst of family upheaval felt like abandoning a half-finished renovation. The foundation had been exposed as rotten, but we had only just begun to rebuild. My farewell with my parents had been emotional. My mother, who had rarely shown physical affection during my childhood, hugged me tightly at the airport security checkpoint. "We're so proud of you," she whispered, her voice catching. "Come back to us safely." My father, still a man of few words, had pressed a new satellite phone into my hands. "For emergencies," he explained gruffly, "and for calling home more often." Michael had brought Emma and Ethan to say goodbye the night before, a gesture that meant more than he could know. Victoria had not been present, her choice, Michael explained, not wanting to make the moment about their still fragile reconciliation attempt. "She's trying," he assured me. "It's going to take time, but she's doing the work." The children had presented me with handmade cards, wishing me luck on my animal adventure, and extracting promises that I would show them all my photos when I returned. Ethan had even given me a small figurine of a rhino from his prized animal collection. "To keep you safe," he explained solemnly. As the plane took off, I thought about the strange turns my life had taken. A month ago, I had been staying in my sister's guest room, unaware of her betrayal, struggling to understand why my career wasn't progressing as it should. Now I was headed to a career-making assignment with a new understanding of the forces that had been working against me, and unexpectedly a stronger relationship with my parents. The 6 weeks in Africa were transformative. Working alongside dedicated conservationists, witnessing the majesty of rhinos in their natural habitat, and documenting the brutal reality of poaching gave me a new perspective on what mattered. The petty family dynamics that had consumed me seemed less significant against the backdrop of this life-or-death struggle to save an endangered species. I stayed in regular contact with my parents, sending them photos and updates several times a week. To my surprise, they responded with genuine interest and encouragement. My mother even organized a small fundraiser among her friends to support the conservation organization I was working with, raising several $1,000s for anti-poaching equipment. Michael kept me updated on the home front. Victoria was continuing therapy and, according to him, making progress in recognizing her destructive patterns. She had taken a leave of absence from her law firm to focus on her mental health and family relationships, a move that would have been unthinkable for the Victoria I had known all my life. The children called weekly, eager to hear about the rhinos and other animals I was photographing. During one call, Emma shyly asked, "Is Mommy still mad at you?" "Your mom and I are working things out," I answered carefully. "Sometimes adults hurt each other without meaning to, and it takes time to make things better." "She cries sometimes when she thinks we're not looking," Ethan confided. "Daddy says she's sad about mistakes she made." The thought of Victoria, always so composed, so in control, crying over her actions was both surprising and strangely comforting. It suggested that beneath her perfect facade she truly was grappling with the consequences of her behavior. Halfway through my assignment, I received an unexpected email from the editor of National Geographic, the very publication Victoria had turned down on my behalf. They had seen my early work from the Rhino Conservation Project and were interested in featuring it in an upcoming issue focused on wildlife protection efforts. With trembling hands, I called my parents to share the news. My father, never one for emotional displays, cleared his throat several times before responding. "Your mother and I were just talking about how we never subscribed to any magazines where your work appeared," he said, his voice gruff, with suppressed emotion. "We'd like to change that. We want copies of everything you publish from now on." When I ended the call, I sat on the edge of my cot in the conservation camp, watching the African sunset and reflecting on how validation can come in the most unexpected forms and times. After years of seeking my parents' approval, it had finally arrived when I was thousands of miles away, no longer actively pursuing it. The National Geographic opportunity led to others. As word spread about my rhino conservation work, I received inquiries from other publications and organizations interested in similar projects. For the first time in my career, I had the luxury of choosing assignments rather than desperately pursuing any opportunity that came my way. Upon completion of the Africa project, I extended my stay to take on a short assignment documenting elephant migration patterns for a conservation journal. It was during this extension that I received a letter, an actual paper letter, sent via international mail from Victoria. Unlike her earlier email, this letter felt genuinely personal. Written in her familiar neat handwriting, it contained no legal terminology or detached phrasing. Instead, it was a raw outpouring of guilt, regret, and tentative hope. "I've been trying to understand why I was so threatened by your success," she wrote. "My therapist believes it goes back to our childhood, to the roles we were assigned early on. I was the achiever, the responsible one. You were the dreamer, the creative one. When you started achieving recognition for your creativity, it challenged the narrative I had built my entire identity around." She went on to describe her progress in therapy, her efforts to repair her relationship with Michael, which had been severely strained by the revelation of her deception, and her attempts to explain to Emma and Ethan in age-appropriate ways why she had behaved so badly. "I told them that even grown-ups make terrible mistakes sometimes," she wrote. "That jealousy can make people do hurtful things, and that part of being a good person is owning up to your mistakes and trying to make things right." The letter concluded with a paragraph that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I don't know if we can ever be true sisters again in the way I think we both once hoped we could be. But I want you to know that I am genuinely happy for your success now." When Mom sent me the link to that conservation website featuring your rhino photographs, I felt proud. Just proud, without the toxic mix of envy and resentment that used to poison every achievement of yours. That feels like progress to me, like maybe someday I can be the sister you deserve. I read the letter several times over the following days, unsure how to respond, or even if I should respond at all. Part of me wanted to maintain the distance to protect myself from further hurt. But another part recognized the courage it must have taken Victoria to write with such honesty. After careful consideration, I sent a brief email acknowledging her letter and thanking her for her candor. I didn't offer forgiveness, it was still too soon for that, but I did share some photos of the elephant family I was currently documenting, a small gesture of inclusion that felt right in the moment. When I finally returned to the United States after nearly 3 months abroad, I chose to get a small apartment in Boston, rather than staying with either Victoria or my parents. I needed my own space both physically and emotionally, to process everything that had happened and to build a life that wasn't defined by my family dynamics. My parents respected this decision, though they made it clear their home was always open to me. Victoria, too, seemed to understand my need for independence, limiting her contact to occasional texts and emails that were supportive but not intrusive. The real breakthrough in our fractured relationship came unexpectedly through Emma. My niece had developed a passionate interest in photography during my absence, saving her allowance to buy a simple digital camera. When she asked if I would teach her some basic techniques, I agreed to a Saturday afternoon lesson in a nearby park. Victoria dropped Emma off, initially planning to leave us alone for the session. But as she was about to drive away, Emma called out, "Mom, why don't you stay and learn too? Then you and Aunt Jess can take pictures together." The look of uncertain hope on Victoria's face as she turned to gauge my reaction made her appear younger, more vulnerable than I had seen her in years. I found myself nodding before I had fully processed the implications. Sure, I said, surprising myself with the ease of my response. There's plenty of room for both of you in this class. That afternoon, as I taught my sister and niece about composition lighting and the patience required for good photography, something shifted between Victoria and me. We weren't back to being the sisters we once were, too much had happened for that, but we were finding a new way to relate to each other, one built on mutual respect rather than competition. As Victoria awkwardly adjusted her camera settings, struggling with concepts that came naturally to me, she looked up with a self-deprecating smile. I'm not very good at being a beginner, she admitted. I've always avoided things I couldn't immediately excel at. That's the best part of photography, I told her. You never stop being a beginner in some way. There's always something new to learn, some technique to master, some perspective you hadn't considered before. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's what I need more of in my life, things that challenge me to be a beginner again, to be imperfect. As we walked back to our cars at the end of the session, Victoria hesitated, then said quietly, "The National Geographic feature is incredible, Jessica. I've ordered 5 copies. I hope that's okay." It was a small moment but significant, an acknowledgement of my success without resentment or qualification. And for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt the faint possibility that someday we might find our way back to being sisters in a meaningful sense of the word. 1 year after the confrontation that had torn our family apart and set in motion a series of painful but necessary changes, we gathered once again for a family dinner, this time at my parents' home rather than Victoria's. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different from that fateful night when water had been thrown and truths revealed. My career had flourished beyond my expectations. The National Geographic feature had led to a book deal documenting endangered species worldwide, and I had recently been awarded a prestigious grant to continue my conservation photography work. I now had a permanent apartment in Boston, though I still traveled frequently for assignments. Victoria had made significant changes as well. After extending her leave of absence from the law firm, she ultimately decided not to return to corporate law. Instead, she had taken a position with a nonprofit organization providing legal services to environmental groups, a move that reduced her income, but according to her, gave her work more meaning and purpose. Her relationship with Michael had weathered the storm, emerging stronger after months of couples therapy and honest communication. He had supported her career shift completely, telling me privately that he preferred this more authentic version of his wife to the perfect but brittle woman she had been trying to maintain. Emma and Ethan had adjusted to the changes in their family with the resilience of children. Emma's interest in photography had grown, and she now accompanied me on local shoots when her school schedule permitted. Ethan, not to be outdone, had developed an interest in writing about wildlife, dictating stories about the animals in my photographs for Michael to transcribe. My parents, perhaps the most surprising transformation of all, had become my staunch supporters. My mother proudly displayed my photographs in their home and routinely shared my professional updates with anyone who would listen. My father, still a man of few words, had taken to sending me relevant news articles about conservation efforts, with brief notes saying things like, "Thought this might interest you," or "Good subject for your next project." As we sat around the dinner table enjoying my mother's pot roast and catching up on each other's lives, Victoria cleared her throat and raised her glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, looking directly at me with clear eyes unclouded by resentment or competition. "To Jessica, whose talent and perseverance have brought attention to important conservation efforts around the world. Your work matters, and we're all so proud of you." To Jessica, everyone echoed, glasses raised. The simple acknowledgement, delivered without qualification or undertone, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away, smiling at my sister across the table, and to family I added, raising my own glass, to learning that, blood isn't just about loyalty, but about growth, forgiveness, and second chances. After dinner, as we were helping clear the dishes, Victoria pulled me aside into our father's study. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a thick envelope. Inside was a legal document, a formal letter she had drafted and sent to every contact she had previously misled about my availability or professionalism. The letter not only corrected the record but explicitly praised my work and professional conduct. "I sent these out 3 months ago," Victoria explained, watching my face as I scanned the document. "I wanted to make sure I had reached everyone I had ever contacted about you." I looked up at her, touched by the thoroughness of her attempt to right her wrongs. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," she said simply. "It was the right thing to do." Later that evening, as the family gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, Emma proudly presented a school project she had completed, a photo essay about family relationships featuring candid shots she had taken of all of us over in the past year. "My teacher said it showed real emotional depth," she announced, beaming, as we passed around her work. The photographs were surprisingly good for a child her age, capturing moments of connection and reconciliation. Victoria and me sitting side by side at Emma's birthday party, heads bent together over a shared joke. My father helping me carry photography equipment to my car. My mother embracing Victoria after her first environmental law victory. The final image in the series took my breath away, a photograph Emma had taken of Victoria and me during one of our now regular photography outings. We were standing at the edge of a lake, cameras in hand, Victoria listening intently as I pointed something out on the horizon. The sun was setting behind us, casting our profiles in silhouette, two distinct shapes with undeniable similarities. Emma had titled the photo "Sisters." As I looked up from the photo essay, I caught Victoria's eye across the room. The silent acknowledgement that passed between us contained all the complexity of our shared history, the pain, the betrayal, the difficult path to reconciliation, but also something new, mutual respect, and the tentative foundation of a healthier relationship. The karma that had seemed so important to me in the immediate aftermath of discovering Victoria's betrayal had manifested not as punishment or revenge, but as transformation. Victoria had lost the perfect image she had clung to so desperately but gained authenticity. I had lost the simple trust I once had in my sister, but gained confidence in my own worth independent of family validation. Our parents had lost their idealized vision of Victoria, but gained a more balanced appreciation of both their daughters. And perhaps most importantly, Emma and Ethan were growing up in a family where mistakes could be acknowledged, apologies could be made, and relationships could be rebuilt, not perfectly, but honestly. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Victoria hesitated by the door, then asked quietly, "Would you be willing to speak at a career day at Emma's school next month? They're looking for people with unconventional jobs. And she specifically requested you." A year ago, such a request would have been laden with competitive undertones or ulterior motives. Now it was simply a sister asking a favor, a mother trying to make her daughter happy. "I'd be honored," I replied, and meant it. Walking to my car under a sky full of stars, I reflected on how far we had all come since that dramatic family dinner. The journey hadn't been easy, and the healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. But we were moving forward, finding a new equilibrium based on truth rather than facades. Sometimes justice doesn't look like we expect it to. Sometimes it's not about punishment or vindication, but about restoration and growth. My sister had poured water on my head and given me 10 minutes to leave her house. What happened then wasn't an explosion or a dramatic revenge, but the beginning of a painful, necessary transformation for our entire family. And in the end, that was the most satisfying justice of all. Hey everyone, thank you for staying with me until the end of this emotional family journey. I'm curious, have you ever experienced a moment where family, karma, or justice came full circle in your own life? I'd love to hear your in stories in the comments below. If this tale of family betrayal and eventual healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories with unexpected endings. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that family relationships can heal even after serious betrayal. Thank you so much for watching my story. Remember, sometimes the most powerful form of justice isn't revenge, but the growth and transformation that comes from facing hard truths. Until next time.